Okay, now let's work on the timeline. What we need to do is generate calendar by displaying all the dates between project start date and project deadline, project end date. As you know, here in the dashboard class, we store in the state start date and end date for each individual project. Then here, when we iterate through projects array, we pass down corresponding data for each individual project to project component, this one. In the project component we call the calendar. So what we need to do right now, when we call calendar, we need to pass down start date and end date. As you know, project component receives props as this props project data, and what I'm interested in right now is dot start date, and here the same, this props project data and end date. This way we call the calendar component and use props to pass down start date and end date. Okay, now project calendar, this one. Let's receive props as props, and here instead of November I'm going to display props dot start date. Control S to save, and as you can see, we get data from the state. For each individual project we get start date. Now let's see if end date works as well. This one is start date. Let's try end date, props, end date. Control S. Okay, perfect. We get start date and we get end date. Works fine. Now let's leave just start date here. And now how do we display all the dates between start date and end date? First of all, please pay attention that the dates we get as props here are just strings. Okay, we need to convert these strings to dates, to JavaScript dates. So here I'm going to define new constant, start date equals new date, and props start date. So what we do here is receive start date as props and convert it to JavaScript date. Okay, let's try if we can display start date here. Break and start date. Now we get an error. Objects are not valid as a React child. That's because if you have a JavaScript date like this and you want to display day or month or year of this date, you need to use date object methods. Here you can see date object methods. We are interested in three methods: get date, which returns day, get full year, and get month. Instead of calling start date here, I'm going to use start date dot get date. As you can see, it displays 10 as 10th day. Now let's try month. Okay, so we have day. Now let's try month. Month start date dot get month parentheses, Control S. Okay, now as you can see, it displays 9, although here as original start date we have 10. Now let me explain what happens here. as you can see here, getMonth method returns month number from 0 to 11, which means that January is 0 and December is 11. That's something to keep in mind. Now let's try to display year. Start date dot get full year, parentheses, Control S. Perfect. So we display data properly. Let's get rid of these lines here. It was just for testing. Now let's define second constant here and date, and let's do the same. New date, parentheses, props, and date, semicolon. Now this way we have project start date and end date as JavaScript dates, not just strings. Okay. Now how do we iterate between these two dates? What I'm going to do first is create a new variable, days to print, and I'm going to make it an array. And for now, let's just create some simple loop to display some numbers between, let's say, from 0 to 10. For that, I'm going to create a new variable, I equals 0, and let's use while loop, while I is less or equal to 10. Now what I'm going to do is days to print dot push, and I'm going to push to this array list items with I, and here on the next line I plus plus semicolon to increment I. And now let's define key I, and here instead of list items, curly brackets, days to print, Control S. Okay, perfect. We display numbers between 0 and 10. Now, using the structure of this simple loop, I'm going to show you how to iterate between these two dates. Now, 0 is the start point and 10 is the end point, right? So start date goes here and end date goes here. We leave this line as it is. And now, how do we increment a date? It was easy to increment an integer, but now it is a JavaScript date, right? So how do we do that? Let's remove this part. I equals new date. And first of all, we need year. I dot get full year. I dot get month. I dot get date plus 1, semicolon here. And here, instead of I'm going to display I dot get date, since we are interested only in days. So this way we have a loop between start date and end date. For each iteration we push a list item to this array. Okay, we display only day value from JavaScript date, and for each iteration we add one day. Okay, perfect. We start from number 10. Here, as you can see, start date is 10th of October. It gets until 31 because there are 31 days in October. Okay, right? Then we start from 1 until 30. There are 30 days in November, obviously. Here we have 31 days of December. Now of course we have a little CSS bug here, which we can easily fix. Project.css, and let me find this part here. Instead of hard coding width to 1000 pixels, I'm going to use white space, no wrap, semicolon, Control S, and that's it. Days are displayed in one beautiful line. We have a little bug here, and also the left side gets deformed because we have display flex on the project class. So now we need to find project left class, which is this one. Instead of using width 400 pixels, let's use flex 0, 0, 400 pixels, semicolon, Control S, and perfect. Actually it's too wide, let's make it 350, Control S, and perfect.